Welcome back to Green Mountain Mornings on WKVT 100.3 FM and AM 1490. 49 degrees outside, 8:23 on the clock, and I have on the phone with me Randy Holhut. Hello, Randy.
Good morning, Olga. Good morning, everyone. Hi, Joyce.
Hi, Joyce, and hi, Agatha Kitty.
Meow.
Meow. So tell me, Randy, I am so excited. All the President's Men will be screening in town.
Yes, this is the next installment of our journalism goes to the movie series, picking films that kind of address different topics in our chosen line of work, and the importance of it. And I figure, given the various investigations going on with our current president and how the heat is slowly building for perhaps impeachment of our current president, that perhaps we should hearken back to those thrilling days of yesteryear, or not so thrilling days of yesteryear, where obscure burglary reported at the Democratic National Headquarters at a office complex called the Watergate in Washington turned into a scandal that brought down a president.
And it's amazing that small snowball grew into a boulder.
Yes, and this was a lot of people who, well, in the 70s, that was the movie that got a whole generation of men and women into journalism because of the, I can't say that glamorized journalism, All the President's Men, but because since we don't look like Robert Redford or
I wish.
And we look more like Dustin Hoffman.
I think we look more like the editor.
Which one? I mean,
wasn't there one that was kind of bald and cranky and drinking all the time?
The Jack Warden character.
Yeah.
I think that was the composite of a couple of editors, but the movie resonates with reporters just because of what happens when you're on a story and the work that you have to do to get things right. And you remember those phone calls and the fact checking, mm-hmm. and trying to make sure that what you have is correct, and dealing with sources who may not be totally on the level with you or have their own agendas.
Yes.
And it's not terribly glamorous, and that's the thing that makes All the President's Men work, is that it doesn't particularly show journalism as a glamour profession. It's long hours. It's really can be boring and tedious at times. But then there's that moment when you find the piece that illuminates all the other pieces you have.
Right.
And it comes together and shows something. But the thing with that movie is that, they had all the early reporting that showed that the White House might have had some involvement with the break-in, mm-hmm. and Nixon still won by a landslide.
Wow.
That 93% of American newspapers in 1972 endorsed Richard Nixon for president. 93%.
That's sobering.
So when you see that the last scene of the movie, and since this is out there, we all know it's not exactly spoiler alert here. Mm-hmm. The last scene in the movie where we see the Nixon inauguration.
Yeah.
Playing on the television in the Washington Post newsroom, and some of the reporters and editors gather around the television. And you see off on the frame Woodard and Bernstein work on the phone, working a story and typing mm-hmm. away. Mm-hmm. And you know that, okay, at that point on January 20th, 1973, it looked like they failed. Nixon's president. The reporting didn't make a difference. And then you get to the final scenes of that movie when you see the teletype. Mm-hmm. Agnew resigns.
Yes.
Senate Watergate Committee forms. House votes for impeachment, and then the final teletype: Nixon resigns.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great closing scene, and I like that you bring up, All the President's Men, their portrayal of journalism, because it is so often in film and television fiction stories, the journalists are either the demons or the saviors. And people forget that it's not a glamorous profession, that it's long hours and a lot of dotting the I's and crossing the T's.
Yes, especially nowadays when lawyers are intimately involved
Eh.
in in the profession, because any fool can go to court and file a lawsuit, and then frequently most fools do.
Yeah.
and that's where having legal protection helps, and good lawyers make for good newspapers.
So if folks want to catch the screening and also hear from the special guests that you have
Yes,
arranged.
and if you're listening, I hope you show up on Sunday. But I've convinced Susan Small here, who's been reporting for the Rutland Herald for almost 40 years, and she's had her own experiences dealing with
Mm,
the problems of the First Amendment and
yes.
and lawsuits. I mean, when I first met her, she was facing jail time for not revealing her source.
Right. Yeah,
Back,
she is
back.
not someone to be messed with.
Yeah, she's a really good reporter, and
Mm,
one of the best in the state still
yeah.
after all these years. And one of my favorite editors I've ever worked for, Kate Casa, who was the editor at the Reformer
Mm-hmm.
back in the late, right around, well, actually the turn of the century. She she got to the Reformer, and she was now she's working up at SIT as their editorial manager.
Right.
And she's also has a wealth of experience in that regard too. She was working for the McClatchy papers before she came east.
Uh-huh. And
So they'll be talking. They have, I freely admit, they have far more experience than I in terms of having to deal with really tough stories and facing down very powerful people.
mhm. This is true. Yeah, they have both really gone to bat for the First Amendment and for the public's right to know. So what time and where?
Well, this will be happening Sunday, October 22nd,
Mhm.
4 p.m. at the main theater in the Latches. So this will be up on the big screen. So you can,
Oh, as a movie from the 70s should be viewed.
yes.
Wonderful. Hey Randy, we have to go to a break,
Okay.
but Randy and I will be back. Welcome back to Green Mountain Mornings on WKVT 100.3 FM and AM 1490. 8:39, 49 degrees. I'm your host, Olga Peters. And if you're just joining me, I have on the phone with me Randy Holhut, deputy editor of The Commons, the Windham County's only independent source for news and views. I guess I shouldn't say only, but my favorite independent source for news and views.
Yes, we forgot one little thing when we were talking about the All the President's Men screen. Donation. Oh, it's by donation, so,
Mm-hmm.
and where it's being put on by the Friends of the Brooks Memorial Library, and the Commons, and the Reformer, and Latches Arts. We're all getting together on this one. So, and we'll have the panel discussion with Kate Casa and Susan Small here and myself, and maybe even John Potter jumping in too after the film.
Oh, fantastic.
So, and the Patriots are playing the late game on it's a Sunday night game, so you can't use that as an excuse for not showing up.
So, yes, be at the Latches 4 p.m. to see a screening on Sunday.
On
to,
Sunday,
to
all the
see a
President's
screening
Men.
of All the President's Men. And just to put some of the importance of why we should be paying attention to journalism,
Well,
I want to share this with you, Randy.
yes.
So when I was going through my prep materials this morning, I came across a very short news brief that, Trump, how he loves his tweets. Well, a poll has come out, and I couldn't see who had done the poll, but it said 46% of Americans think the media makes up stories about Trump. And of course, he's all excited because he's like, see, fake news, say fake news.
And dollars to donuts, he heard that on Fox and Friends this morning and then tweeted it out.
Oh, probably. And the poll he is ignoring at this moment is that his approval rating is in the dumps.
The lowest for a first-year president ever.
Oh, really? I didn't realize it'd gotten
Yeah.
that low.
Yeah, it's normally, if you're a first-year president, you have a certain amount of goodwill, and people saying, well, he's still growing into the job or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
No, he's proven his incompetence beyond the shadow of a doubt on so many different fronts in so many different ways. It's only the bitter enders who see that their guy can't do anything wrong. So,
Well, you got to double down when sometimes it's human nature. You double down when you realize how bad a mistake you've made.
well,
I just
uh,
offended half of my family with that comment.
but you're mentioning about the importance of journalism. Wendy Levy's story about transparency.
Yes.
That's why that was in the lead and on the front page of the Commons this week. Jim Condos, arguably one of the best Secretary of States in the country,
Mm-hmm.
every year goes around to the state and talks to town officials, at least the ones that bother to show up at these things, and there were precious few of them at the at the Brattleboro event.
Oh, really? Tisk, tisk, tisk.
Tisk, 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 to remind them about the various elements of the Public Records Act and the Open Meeting Law, and letting them know that what they should be doing, and that compliance really isn't that hard.
Mm. That's the thing that always amazes me is when a public official does step afoul of the open meeting laws or the open documents law, which are kind of collectively called the public's right to know.
Yes.
It's Vermont is pretty easy to adhere to. And so it kind of takes effort to step in it when it comes to that legislation.
And we're not even one of the better states for that. I mean, there
No.
are states that have more stringent open meeting laws and public records laws. That there's still way too many exceptions to the law than in Vermont as compared to other states.
Mm-hmm. Now, the one thing that, as a journalist, I do like that Vermont does is it does have a 3-day requirement for response time. So if you put in a public records request, per se, whether you're a journalist or just a public citizen, um, the municipal body must respond to you within 3 days by either fulfilling the request or telling you why they can't or won't fulfill the request.
Yeah.
And I like that because it kind of keeps things from going into the limbo.
Well, the other good thing about the Secretary of State's office is that you call them and they generally get back to you very fast with an answer. And we have to do that a lot with our boards around the county to say, hey, X town did Y. Is this okay?
Mm-hmm.
And it's nice to have a Secretary of State that doesn't have his or her thumb on the scale. I think Jim Condos is following ably in the tradition of Deb Markowitz of the default position of, hey, when it comes to voting, let's make sure everyone can vote.
Yeah.
Something that many secretaries of state around the country seem to have problems with.
Mm-hmm. Well, and Condos is very clear that everything elected officials do or produce, like documents, are open. He presumes a culture of openness.
Well, reading that part from the Vermont Constitution, and this is a great line,
Yes.
that all power being originally inherent in and consequently derived from the people, therefore, all officers of government, whether legislative or executive, are their trustees and servants, and at all times in a legal way accountable to them. In other words, you work for us. You have a responsibility to let us know what you're doing.
Perfect. Yeah. Yep.
And that's right up in the beginning of the Constitution of Vermont.
Mm-hmm. And while Vermont law does have a lot of exemptions to its own right to know laws, I do like that Condos, he says if there's ever, and I think the Supreme Court does this too, if there's ever a question about whether something should be exempt or open, Vermont law likes to lean towards open.
Yeah. And this is a problem at every level of government, as we're seeing around. This is particularly now in the age of Trump, as federal agencies scrub their websites of information that used to be there
Mhm.
to try and keep people in the dark on things they should know. I
A
mean, this is the type of thing that's essential to good government. Let openness and transparency and access to public records and public information.
So for you, Randy, I know that Condos has done this transparency tour multiple years in a row. For you, what is your major takeaway?
Well, that someone who's in charge of enforcing these laws takes them seriously enough to do a tour every year to let the public as well as public officials know, hey, this is what's happening with the laws.
Hmm.
And this is what may have happened in the ledge if they've altered them or tweaked them
Hmm.
in the interim. And they're not that hard to comply with. He doesn't have much sympathy for the towns that don't want to put up websites, their own websites, because they're afraid they can't comply with the act of putting up agendas and putting
Yes.
up minutes on the
Uh huh.
website in a timely manner.
Uh huh. And so wonderful. Anything there with transparency you want to let people know about before we move on to another riveting topic?
Well, Wendy's story was worth reading because it's also a nice little primer about what the law is, and that's one of the good things our paper does is kind of explain things.
Yes. Yeah. For folks who haven't checked out the article, it is a good, as Randy called it, a primer and kind of a how to, this is how it works. And I encourage everyone to check that out. So just quickly, Randy, we have a major education vote coming up on November 7th.
Yep, and the signs are all over Dummerston right now.
Oh, and they are all over Guilford as well. I was driving through there the other day.
Vote no, vote no. And funny that Guilford and I haven't been in Putney since, and there are probably signs up there too. That's changing. But yes, with Act 46 and school consolidation, there's a fear, and I think it may be legitimate fear, that something that seems pretty innocent on its surface, consolidating governance of schools
Yes.
into one big super board, may turn into something that might end up merging Dummerston and Putney's central school, or closing down Guilford School and sending the kids to all the kids to Brattleboro, or something else that eliminating local control over the really beloved little elementary schools in Wyndham Southeast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've been watching the Act 46 progress, and it's interesting because the Act 46 study committees have really put in a huge amount of work, and I have not seen anyone on those study committees who are treating the process frivolously.
Yes, and they are. But
But
this is a case where two really diametrically opposed philosophies are bumping up against one another.
mhm,
On one side, there's the mutable fact that the population, the school age population, has been decreasing for over the last 30 years. Yet the cost of education has kept steadily going up, even though there are fewer students.
right.
So you got that on one side, and then on the other side, you have Vermont being usually ranked in the top 5, if not the top 3 for quality of public education,
Mhm.
because of small class sizes and more attention to kids and smaller schools that focus more attention on students. And so, what are you going to do? Do you want you want to save money and compromise the quality of your schools, or do you want quality schools but and pay for them?
Right. Right. Well, and I think there's another dynamic here too with the Brattleboro, Dummerston, Putney, Guilford, Am I missing anyone? No.
No, that's
That's it.
well,
um,
now that Vernon's left.
now that Vernon's gone. I think the other dynamic we forget is that structurally, a lot may not change for Brattleboro because it's got such a large population and it has the 3 elementary schools. So there may not be a lot of structural change for Brattleboro, but who knows? I mean, as time goes on, time will tell. However, the story is different for the smaller towns where, like Putney, Dummerston, and Guilford, where the school is a center of the community in a slightly different way as far as town infrastructure and town um, facilities go.
I think the fear is that this will become another Wyndham solid waste management district,
Yes.
and that Brattleboro will get whatever Brattleboro wants, and the rest of the towns will get the short end of the stick.
And to be clear, we don't want to paint the folks who are working this problem within Brattleboro with that they're doing something nefarious. It's that difference in population.
Yeah, that Brattleboro is, by virtue of its size, is always going to have the most influence
Right.
and the most say.
And
So when
many of
Brattleboro
the
decided
resources.
it didn't want to do the rollover boxes anymore, that killed it for the rest of the district.
Correct.
And so if Brattleboro decides, it'd be better for the district that they consolidate all the elementary schools, well, then that's what may happen. Or at least that's the fear that's what's happened. But there's also another thing that has to be dealt with, which is if you don't figure out a way to bring down the cost of education and make and harmonize the curriculum to make it so all the schools have access to different things, the state may step in and do it for you, and you won't have a say.
There you go. There you go.
And that's a real concern for a lot of the towns that are considering this. That if we don't do it, the state will do it, and we may not like what the state decides for us.
That is such an excellent point, Randy. And so I don't know about you, but I would encourage folks. Mike Farr has done a lot of good writing on Act 46 for the Commons and Vermont Digger and the Reformer. I would encourage people to go back and look at those articles to kind of prime yourself for the vote on November 7th, because that is the stakes. If we don't, Act 46 is a state law. It must be complied with no matter what. And if towns don't do it, the state will.
Yes, and that's among the things that are discussed in the Voices page this week. So you can check it out there, too.
Perfect. So, hey, Randy, it breaks my heart, but it's time to say goodbye.
Oh.
Aw. But I am glad to know that I will be speaking to you in 3 weeks.
3 weeks. Yes, but you get Wendy and Mike.
Which is also wonderful.
Yes.
Well, I hope to see you Sunday.
Okay. Should be fun. I'm looking forward to it.
4 p.m. at the Latches.
4 p.m. at the Latches. All the President's Men, plus special guest stars Kit Casa and Susan Small here.
Thank you so much, Randy, and have a wonderful weekend.
Okay.
Bye.